establishing healthy eating in children. It is absolutely a very general topic to talk about. However, establishing healthy eating or healthy eating habits in children, it's a topic of current interest, not only to us, the pediatricians and the nutritionists, but also to many households, starting from villages to towns, at national level, and also at global level. It's just because lot of unhealthy eating habits are being adopted by children, which are carried on to the adulthood. Right? So that is why we are talking about establishing healthy eating. So today I'm going to share some of the information that might be helpful to you all in order to guide and support the parents, the families and kids that you are coming across in your pediatric practice. So in my talk, I will be focusing on what is healthy eating and the benefits, then the problems caused by unhealthy eating behavior, and what are the barriers to develop a routine of healthy eating in kids, and finally, how can we overcome these barriers? Right. So what is healthy eating? It's quite simple to say. Healthy eating refers to eating a balanced diet with a variety of foods at right proportions. So it's easy to say, but maybe it's a bit difficult to execute. Right? Okay, now babies are born with an innate ability to survive. I mean, for survival, they have to eat and drink. So they have their innate regulatory mechanisms to learn to eat and drink and have a, to achieve adequate growth, right? So we'll see how this eating behavior develops in infancy and toddlerhood. Okay, so how does this development of eating behavior sets in? Now, developing eating behaviors or eating habits is just part of the natural growth and development process in an infant or a toddler. Now, the first year of life is crucial in this sense because there's a rapid developmental change occurs related to all developmental milestones, including the eating behavior. Now, a newborn baby who starts supine feeding with the achievement of gross motor milestones will acquire seated feeding. So it's quite fascinating, isn't it? So development from supine feeding to seated feeding. Similarly, consumption of liquids will change over to semi-solids into solids with a variety of textures. So that's another development. And then along with the development of oral motor skills, the suck-swallow mechanism of eating will develop into a chew-swallow mechanism. So where the baby becomes, ready for complementary feeding. And with the acquisition of fine motor skills, an infant will develop from the mode of feeding, the being fed mode, into self-feeding mode by about 2 years of life. So as these developmental milestones of eating behavior are achieved, there are so many internal regulatory cues within the infant which controls the consumption of energy or the amount of energy that the infant or the toddler takes in. So there are internal regulatory cues for hunger and satiety to control the energy intake. So this is the normal development of the eating behavior in a child. Okay, now once the all those developmental behaviors that I described you in the previous slide are achieved, then it's a matter of transition to the adult diet, starting with a modified adult diet into proper adult diet. Now, this process is very crucial for development of eating habits. So when infants and toddlers are exposed to a variety of healthy food, including fruits and vegetables and healthy food choices, and also when the parents and the caregivers make sure that the mealtime routines are consistent at home, right? And they themselves role model to their infants and toddlers how to make food choices and the eating behaviors, then it leads to acceptance of healthy food as a lifelong behavior or a habit. And also it helps children to establish healthy eating for the rest of their lives, right? So we are going to see why this process is disrupted and why we are unable to establish healthy eating in some children. So there are a lot of evidence to say that there is a positive association between dietary habits and the nutritional status of children. Now, this is a study where data has been gathered from infants and young children between 6 and 24 months of age across 11 countries, where they have demonstrated a positive association between dietary diversity and the nutritional status. So exposure to fruits and vegetables in infancy and toddlerhood has been associated with acceptance of these foods in later life as well. Right. So this is a very important concept that the parents to be or pre-pregnant counseling should include. Right. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Now, healthy eating is beneficial at all ages, not only children, but also for adults. But however, we talk about healthy eating in early childhood because there's a phenomenal growth and development occur in the early years of life, where nutrition plays a very crucial role in their growth and development. Right, so we'll look at more benefits of healthy eating. So as you all know already, the infancy and toddlerhood is marked by the fastest rate of brain growth and physical growth. So for optimal brain growth, you all know that a balanced diet with adequate macro and micronutrients are very important. And similarly for the musculoskeletal development, for the endurance of the child, again, a balanced diet is extremely helpful. And also, a healthy balanced diet and good mealtime routines are very important for the proper psychological maturation of a child. If a child establishes healthy eating habits and exposed to good healthy food preferences early on in their lives, they chose to adopt a healthy food habit for the rest of their lives, and also they build awareness on the value of nutritious food so that they learn to make the correct food choices as adults, right? So we'll move on. So a healthy balanced diet is crucial for maturation of the immune system. So you all know children who do not receive adequate nutrition are vulnerable to develop recurrent diarrheal and respiratory infections, which would further hamper their growth. And also, on the other hand, a filling healthy diet is extremely helpful in stabilizing a child's behavior. So what do I mean by that? Both skipping meals and overeating would make a child irritable and hinder the performance of the child. I'm especially talking about preschool children and the early school years, right? So when they don't take breakfast or if they skip breakfast and go to school, it affects their concentration on schoolwork. Similarly, overeating affects them in a similar manner. Right. So stabilization of the behavior is helped out with a good meal. Right. Again, healthy social functioning. Now, a child who gets used to routines right? So the proper routines for meal times, they all go together, the toileting, sleeping times, play times, right? So a child who develops routine in one aspect is more likely to get disciplined in other routines as well, right? So having a good meal at proper time will help them get accustomed to proper toileting habits, achieving a good sleep, and have good endurance for playtimes. And also, finally, it affects or improves the family dynamics as well. Constant battles over meal times will affect the domestic, atmosphere at varying degrees in different families. And also, it helps children adjust to schools and have, uh, you know, uh, friends and socializing, all that is affected by healthy eating, right? So let's move on. So our concern as healthcare professionals is, now certain children do not establish a good eating behaviors, so that will lead to adopting unhealthy food preferences in adolescence and early adulthood, which leads to poor nutritional status. Poor nutritional status could either be undernutrition or, to the other end of the spectrum, overweight or obesity, right? So both of which will have a detrimental impact on the health of the child. So that is where our concerns are, and that is where we need to find what can we do to establish healthy eating patterns in children, right? So now, looking at the consequences of unhealthy eating. Now, as I told you, certain a group of children develop eating problems. So, the surveys and various studies done in the community have revealed 25 to 45% children develop problems associated with eating. And these problems are common during infancy. Unfortunately, most of these eating problems are temporary and without much intervention, and but just by simple guidance, most of these problems can be sorted out, right? But however, persistence of chaotic eating behaviors will affect the growth and development, the social relationships, and will carry on to their adult life as well. Okay, so talking about the consequences of unhealthy eating, so focusing on underweight. So if they are undernourished because of poor eating practices, these children are at higher risk of infectious diseases, and they become stunted, and their potential as adults will go down. And especially when we talk about girls in the childbearing age, they are vulnerable for adverse pregnancy outcomes as well. On the contrary, the other end of the spectrum is overweight and obesity. Adoption of an unhealthy lifestyle, along with unhealthy food choices, especially including salty, fatty, and sugary food, will lead to overweight and obesity, along with micronutrient deficiencies. And more than 50% of children with overweight and obesity will end up as obese adults, and they are vulnerable to develop non-communicable diseases earlier in their lives. And also due to multiple reasons, including psychological factors and also things like obstructive sleep apnea, these children will not achieve their optimal educational achievements. So their entire life is affected because of their unhealthy eating. So that makes us realize the importance of establishing these eating behaviors. So I will just, take you to glance at the problem of underweight and overweight globally, regionally, and nationally. So this article in Lancet compares the progression of underweight and overweight, comparing from 1975 up to 2016. So you all can see, if you look at the underweight the table showing the underweight's prevalences, it's going down. I mean, globally, you can see the prevalence of underweight among girls and boys. I think this especially looking at under fives, it's going down. But regionally, we have higher prevalences, especially because of India, where there are, many children who are underweight. But at national level, we are facing a burden of about 17.3%. This applies to both sexes. So that's why I have included in both columns. So that is where we are at national level with underweight. Looking at the overweight and obesity statistics, it's going up globally, but more so at regional level. So at regional level, I mean, there's a marked increase. It says that in developing countries, there is a threefold rise in overweight and obesity compared to the Western countries now. But nationally, according to the Family Health Bureau statistics, at 2016, the national burden of overweight and obesity are around 7.4% in girls and 6.9% in boys. But however, in various districts, we have conducted obesity surveys where we have found our prevalences are now between 11 to 15%. But that is restricted to few districts in our country. Okay, let's move on. So you all know we are double burdened with both with underweight and overweight. So there are evidences to say that unhealthy food choices which occur during the transition to adult diet are likely to persist into adulthood. So these are two articles which I extracted. The one above, they have studied 3,000 infants and toddlers from a deprived area in the United States, where they found on the day of dietary recall, more than 50% of infants, toddlers, and their parents did not recall that they have eaten any kind of a fruit, right? And also, another study shows that, again, it's a meta-analysis showing evidence that although the energy consumption is adequate, due to lack of diversity, there is micronutrient deficiency among children, especially with iron and zinc. So which this paper, recommends that, nutritional guidance is needed during dietary transition in early childhood. So that is our responsibility as health professionals. So why do children not establish healthy eating behaviors? What are these barriers? Now, there are multiple influences that affect their transition into adult type diet. Now, as I told you, they have their innate development which help them eat and drink to thrive. But there can be various hazards which cause disruption of their normal development, which I'm going to talk to you about later. And there are so many family influences, the family trends that can affect the child's transition, and the food environment also play a crucial role. Right. Now, why do children deviate from their normal development of internal regulatory mechanisms? Now, as you all are aware now, there's a natural response to innate regulatory cues for hunger and satiety in all infants and toddlers. Right? So, inadequate recognition by parents and also overriding of these regulatory cues by familial and cultural practices, they will all disrupt this natural response in children. And that will cause deviation in the innate regulatory mechanisms. I will elaborate this a bit more in the next slide. Now, early on in the infancy, the baby and the mother establish a partnership in which they recognize and interpret both verbal and non-verbal communication signals from one another. from baby to the mother and from mother to the baby. And this two-way process or this reciprocal process forms the basis of emotional bonding between the infant and the mother, and later in infancy between the infant and the caregiver sometimes, to establish healthy social functioning and eating behaviors. So if the mother or the caregiver is non-responsive or inconsistent in this communication process, the attachment built becomes insecure. And eating and the mealtime may become an occasion of unproductive and an upsetting battle over food. So it's very important or very crucial that this baby-mother partnership develop. They understand, each other understand these innate responses, and we respond to that in an appropriate manner. So when it doesn't happen, the baby experiences hunger as a very unpleasant experience because the baby is kept hungry for a prolonged period simply because the mother or the caregiver does not recognize the baby is irritable because he or she is hungry. And on the other hand, when the satiety cues are not identified properly, the baby may be overfed. So the satiety, the happy feeling of satiety, the baby will have to experience it with so much of unpleasantness. The satiety is not a pleasant feeling for the baby anymore. Right? So this gives a very, bad beginning for the baby to develop the eating behaviors. And to add to that, the family and cultural influences. I'm sorry about there's one spelling mistake in the influences, one E is missing. Sorry about that. Now, the parental eating behavior has a major impact in the development of the eating habits in the child. And the families that involve kids in meal preparation, they get to know how food comes from kitchen to the table. Otherwise, when children are not involved in food preparation, they only see the food that come into the table. They don't know what happens in the food preparation, right? So it's important for children to realize what are their parents' food choices, what are these preparation methods, so that, inculcate good preferences or good choices in children. And also role modeling behavior by the parents, the table manners, how they enjoy food, right? How they take new foods. So all these are important and will have a lifelong effect on food preferences in children. The environmental, food environment. Now, most children live in an obesogenic food environment. So where they are frequently exposed to fast food, which are salty, more sugary, and have more fat, but lack micronutrients. Right? So there are families who eat out frequently at restaurants or bring takeaway food home. So children are mostly exposed to these unhealthy food choices early on in life. And certain children, due to ignorance of parents, they get exposed to commercial food products very often, beverages, right? So the food environment plays a crucial role where we need to address, when talking to parents, right? Now, when we talk to parents, now, some of the parents come out with these picky eaters. Now they say, we know what foods are healthy for our children. We always make the right food at the right time. We have mealtime routines. But however much we offer healthy food, my child is very picky. He takes only this type of food. He won't take new food. So this is a common complaint. So the picky eaters, we need to understand and we need to tell the parents that this is part of the developmental process of developing eating behaviors. Now, it's part of the children's normal development when we look at the stranger fear, right? So infants and toddlers have stranger fear, but they are very curious about strangers, and at the same time, they are very hesitant to associate with them. And likewise, toddlers thrive. They strive to do new things. They want to try new things out, but they are scared of. I mean, when they are offered a new toy, at first, they approach it with some caution. Right? So same happens with the food. When we offer a new food, they have neophobia. So we have to understand that the parents have to keep on offering it rather than, do, short, very quick cooking to give the baby the foods that the child is used to. So we are offering the same kind of food, and that will inculcate a habit that the child will continue to refuse new food. Right? So I will talk about handling picky eaters in a later slide. Now, another important aspect is the caregiver child context of feeding. Right? Please move on. Now, there are various parenting styles. I'm sure you all are familiar with this. The parenting style affect the feeding style as well. Right? So I will first talk about, now there are 4 types of parenting. Now, there are authoritarian parenting style where there's, parents have high expectations, they are educated parents, and they have a structure or a high nurturing structure for their children. There's a lot of love and warmth, but at the same time, they have demands, they have house rules, so children have to abide by them, but they always negotiate with children, right? So that is the authoritarian type of parenting. And on the other hand, there is an authoritative type of parenting where, again, parents have high expectations, and mostly these are very educated parents. But the parents are very demanding. They have very strict rules, strict structure of nurturing their children. There is love, but lack of warmth. And in the bottom of this illustration I'm showing you, the permissive type of parents, where they love their children a lot. So they care for them, but however, they give too much freedom to the kids. So they say, you are in charge. Now, children can do whatever they like, whatever they want, when they want. So there is lack of parental control. And at the bottom end, we have uninvolved or neglectful parenting, where this happens with very uneducated level of parents. They are not involved, because of poverty or lack of knowledge, and also they are neglecting their children. It's not very common though. So children are on their own. They eat what is there at home. If there is no food, no eating. And if there is unhealthy food, they can eat whatever they like. Right? So there's a lot of negligence there. Right? So we'll move on and see how this affects the feeding style. So there are a lot of studies which have been conducted looking at the parenting style, how it affects the weight status. Right? So this is quite an extensive systematic review looking at the effect of parenting style and the feeding style on the weight status in children between 4 to 12-year-olds, and they have revealed, many studies have revealed that uninvolved and neglectful feeding styles cause high BMI in their children in early adolescence, right? Now, when it comes to the feeding style, how does parenting affect? Now, we'll first look at the responsive feeding style, the authoritative type of feeding. So here the parents encourage eating using supportive and non-directive behaviors. They nurture with a high nurturing structure, and they demand for children to eat healthy food. And here the parents also negotiate with children to eat well using social praise, right? So this responsive feeding is very healthy, right? Okay. And then looking at the controlling feeding style, here there are too many rules. It's a directive and rule-based feeding style, regardless of the child's preferences. Though the child doesn't have any control over the feeding, so the parents have strict rules. And also for food transgressions, children are punished, right? So this is not a very healthy way of feeding children, because we do not take into account the child's preferences at all. Okay, so looking at the indulgent feeding style on the top, the parents, encourage eating, but with few requests, right? So they love their children a lot. They don't want to hurt them. So they allow the children to eat what they like. Although the parents understand this is not the right food, this is not the right choice for my child, but still, I can't hurt my child's feelings. So I allow him to consume that. So in that context, children can get addicted to salty, fatty, sugary food, right? So here, without parents realizing, children can get addicted to unhealthy food behaviors and also unhealthy food preferences, right? So the uninvolved parents, there is really nothing happening there at the household. So there's no food discipline, no punishments, no demands, nothing. It's so disorganized. So, most of these children get stunted and undernourished as well. But, if they exposed to fast food, if there's a lot of takeaway food coming in, they will get used to salty, fatty food as well. So both undernutrition and overweight and obesity can occur in this uninvolved parenting and feeding style. Right. So our challenge is how to support the parents, how to establish healthy eating. Now, as medical professionals, we need to understand what is the eating atmosphere at home. What are the beliefs and what are the cultural practices at home which are going on, which hinder the establishment of eating behavior in the child, and give appropriate education and support to the caregivers. We should always encourage responsive feeding, which has to start at the antenatal clinics or polyclinics, addressing the pregnant mothers, the couples, married couples who are waiting to build up their families. So they should learn during the breastfeeding time itself. They have to build up this emotional bond where they understand and respond appropriately to the internal cues of their baby, right? So they can continue responsive feeding in the future. And also the parents should do role model behavior. Children will not naturally learn what is the best behavior, right? So parents have to role model, right? And they also have to develop mealtime routines, right? The proper meal times. I will talk about this in a little while. And also we have to encourage the family-oriented meal times, the family sitting together and eating, right? So children observe how their parents choose food, right? How they enjoy the satiety, right? All that they learn from their parents, right? And there shouldn't be distractions, no screens during meals. So people shouldn't be watching television and eating. And also it's very important that the meal times are separated from play times, right? Okay, so we'll talk about these things in a little bit more detail. So let's move on. Okay, right. So now establishing feeding. Now the infants have to be fed by the parents or the caregiver up to 8 to 9 months. Now, as you start complementary feeding, parents should have a separate place to feed the baby at every meal time with a nice, pleasant atmosphere, right? So that the infants from very early on, they learn that, when the baby is taken to that place, he or she is looking forward to have the meal. And by about 9 months, as the fine motor development or the fine motor skills are achieved, infants have to be allowed to finger feed with clean hands, right? So they learn the different textures of food. They learn that they can take food from their fingers into the mouth. So we have to allow that developmental process to mature. And then during the second year, I mean from 12 months to 24 months, we need to allow self-feeding with assistance. So this is a bit of a difficult time. I know, it's easier said than done, but we always have to encourage this, right? And by second year, by the completion of second year, we have to train children to self-feed without assistance, right? And at all times, we have to be responsive. That's why I have highlighted here responsive feeding. We should educate the parents not to do any force feeding, right? Because children have to experience the satiety with a pleasant feeling, not by a very frustrating feeling, parents keeping on or nagging them to have more. Right? So, as I told you, the parents should be sensitive to the hunger and satiety cues. They have to differentiate, when the baby becomes irritable, whether it's hunger or whether it's, toileting need or whether sleeping need or whatever, right? So they have to learn from their child, right? So avoid forced feeding and allow kids to touch food with clean hands all the time and make mealtime a pleasant time. When a toddler is fed, the parent, the mother or the caregiver has to talk about the food, the color, the shapes, right? Not anything else. And also, we have to minimize distractions. So I talked about screens and also, feeding the children outside where there are a lot of distractions. It should be discouraged. So babies have to be kept inside the house. There has to be an eating atmosphere when they are fed. Now, when there is food refusal, when a baby refuses food, parents have to try different methods of encouragement. Talking about food, they have to be creative. They have to try different preparations of the same food, giving it in a different texture. There are various preferences in children for various textures, so parents have to identify. And also they can try different combinations like, mixing yogurt with fruits, things like that. So parents have to experiment and find out, different methods. Now, this book gives a wealth of information to the parents. I'm sure you all have come across this parental guide, which is prepared by the Family Health Bureau with the Ministry of Health. This is a parental guide, which has a lot of information for parents of all educational levels. It gives information to the parents. Yeah, if you look at this table, it gives how much food, the required amount for the whole day of the baby, right? So even an uneducated mother can understand how much should I give my baby during the day. So this will prevent overfeeding as well as underfeeding. And also planning your child's meal on your right hand side, you can see. This is a working exercise for the mother. Right? I think a mother does this, with a lot of happiness, with a lot of joy, planning the meal for the child. So the balancing, the variety, so all the information are given in this parental guide. So this is a very good move that we have done at national level. And I think as pediatricians, we have to utilize this. We have to go through this with our parents, we have to give them a very good understanding. I would actually think that we need to expose pregnant mothers to this handbook before the baby is delivered, right? So they look forward to establish good eating habits in their infant. So always parents should take control over the food choice and the mealtime routine. So they have to make sure that there are predictable meal times for the child. So the 3 meal times, there has to be a persistence. So children do not have to wait being hungry, right? And they look forward when they have the feeling of hunger. They anticipate that a meal time is coming now, right? And also having a pleasing eating atmosphere is important, and adequate time, at least 20 to 30 minutes have to be spent at the table. I'm talking about the whole family, right? So family members should not eat very quickly and get out of the table. So the child will be continuing to eat. A child will take more time, right? So the parents have also got to be slow. So too short or too long meal times are both frustrating to the child. And also parents should not allow munching throughout the day. So parents have to have that control. So children who munch throughout the day will hinder their appetite, so they won't be able to have a meal. And here I need to emphasize that continuing breastfeeding beyond 2 years, and even within the second year of life, parents have to be educated that breastfeeding close to meal times is not suitable. Breast milk is quite filling, and by second and third year, breast milk contains more sugar, right? So that will hinder the appetite of the child, and it also affects the personality or the development of self-esteem and all that in the child. So that has to be discouraged. And do not. So what are the do nots? Do not feed the child in a separate place. After about 9 months, when they can sit on the table, things like high chairs, having more pillows, and keeping the child at the same level as others is helpful. Do not have too short or too long meal times. Do not allow distractions, and do not feed to satisfy your emotional need. We have to satisfy the emotional need of the child. So it's very important. Then, a few words about how to handle a picky eater. So as I told you, picky eating is part of their development. So parents have to be very patient with introducing new food. So some children are more picky. So new food have to be introduced, and everybody has to consume, showing, like role modeling to the child. And you have to offer new food several times, like 10 to 15 times, until the child gets used to the texture and the taste of the new food, right? And mother shouldn't be a short order cook. That is, if a child refuses a new food, she shouldn't be going to the kitchen and preparing the same old food. So that meal has to go through with what is available for the baby, right? Otherwise, the baby will go on refusing the new food. And also mothers have to be creative, right? Offering different shapes, in different colors, arrangements, all that will help to overcome this picky eating behavior, right? Okay. Now, so this is about all I have to tell you. I hope I have given you some important information that will help you to talk to parents, unravel the facts that are affecting the child, as barriers to develop their proper eating behavior, and helping parents to establish healthy eating in their children. So that's about it. If you all have any questions, I can take up. So before ending, I would like to sum up what I have told you. I have emphasized why should we talk about establishing healthy eating in children. It's just because 25 to 40% of children do not establish healthy eating behaviors. I talked about the benefits of healthy eating, and learning to choose the healthy, right food from the very beginning of life. And then I talked about the problems related to unhealthy eating behaviors, the barriers, right, to development of these eating behaviors in children. And finally, I touched upon certain facts that are important in guiding parents to help their kids. As medical professionals, especially pediatricians, and there may be some nutrition trainees as well. So we have to help kids build a healthy start to their lives, right? So we need to help the parents. Thank you for listening.